Greetings, fellow seekers of the supernatural. Paranormal M is your guide to the bizarre and the unexplained. Don't miss out on our strange tales. Hit subscribe, hit like, help us grow, and turn on notifications to stay in the loop. Let's unravel the mysteries together. Is there a potential ghost in my apartment? Hi, I recently moved into an apartment just this week. Actually, I've had a few weird things going on, and I wanted to get a few people's opinions on it. I've only officially slept over at this place for 3 nights as I'm writing this now, so I'm still getting used to the apartment. But for the last few days, the toilet's been flushing on its own. The toilet will flush when I'm not around, and I currently live alone. The bathroom is the only part of the apartment that still smells like cigarettes, despite it being newly cleaned out before I moved in. The smell of cigarettes smells as if somebody just lit one. So I'm not like an old cigarette smell kind of a thing that's just lingering because the apartment's old. I've also been having things in my room falling over while I'm in the kitchen cooking, and I'm nowhere near my room. I've been hearing someone also walking in the hallway and on the floorboard. I think the scariest thing that's happened, though, is hearing a woman's voice clear as day at around 4 in the morning. I thought maybe it was from outside the apartment, but I heard it coming from the empty room next door. I've also been smelling a very strong woman's perfume late at night. I don't smell it during the day. All of these weird things keep happening. Not sure really to make of it, but I'd love to hear people's thoughts. I also should mention that I live close to something that's over 100 years old, and it's known to be haunted. You could always have the ghostly perfume in the ghostly bathroom do battle of the smells. I need some advice for the thing that's been following me for over a decade. And please bear with me since I'm a little bit drunk to even write this down. Alright, I'm bared. It all started at my mom's house in the early teens. That's when I started feeling watched going to the bathroom during midnight and the early morning hours. This came to a head when I was finished with my morning shower. I got the extreme feeling of being watched, so I turned around and I saw a head. White face, no distinguishable features, with a top hat around 7 or 8 feet tall. It poked around the doorway to look at me. Since then, I've noticed the floorboards in the front of the room I've lived in creak every night around 3 a.m. I was stupid enough to answer a knock in the middle of the night one day. Oxymoron. And I opened the door. Since then, I've felt watched inside my room as well as having the floorboards creak every night. One day when my mom and my stepdad went out for drinks, I stayed home to play some video games. That's when I heard someone come up the stairs with bottles and walk downstairs again with bottles, which was a daily routine for my mom and stepdad. Soon after, the Wi-Fi went out, so I thought they turned it off and went to watch some TV instead. A couple of hours later, they came home and opened the door to tell me that they were home. After this, everything went back to the old stuff of floorboards creaking and the feelings of being watched. A couple of years later, I moved to my dad's farm, due to circumstances I don't want to explain. I noticed that everything went quiet for a month before the front door started only being locked for me multiple times. As well as my stepmom, she's kinda still sees ghosts, having to do a cleansing of the house. I later found out that she's seen a man with a top hat and a coat around 7 or 8 feet tall standing in the hallway, as well as that the room I was sleeping in was blessed and sealed against spirits. Soon after, I heard the fire door safely close. These are locked from the inside after 9 p.m. At 2 or 3 a.m. that's connecting to the barn and right beside my room opened and closed in rapid succession over about an hour with the dogs barking their souls out. Later on, when I was home alone and had to do the evening round myself with locking everything, I felt like I was being watched from the hay attic in the barn, and soon after saw something disappear behind the round bales that were positioned right in front of the fire safety door, which leads to the house. It got quiet after this until I moved out to my first apartment, which was on the first floor. I got the feeling as if I was being watched from outside the window, like something was peeking inside from the side. Then it stopped. After this, things got a little bit weirder since I started having sleep paralysis for a couple of months where I would see a person undefinable. They were standing in the corner of the bedroom before it would jump onto the bed. I would wake up and I would see that it was somewhere in between 2 and 3 a.m. Soon after, I started seeing different people, which I knew were standing there. Slowly but surely, I got myself from trying to scream in those dreams to pushing myself out of the bed and crawling toward it till it vanished. It all stopped at least for a while when I was able to grab its ankle. Half a year after that, I went abroad to do some work. I wanted to travel where I didn't notice anything in particular, except for a short time where I felt like I was being watched on a field when I started working at 3 a.m. And now, for the absolute reason why I'm asking for help, really. It's that I've been having sleep paralysis again a week ago where I was sleeping on a friend's couch and saw somebody standing in the doorway again where I pushed myself with the couch to somehow get to the person only to be awoken on the floor in the couch. That was to see a friend of mine standing there. This repeated multiple times until I got a hold of him again. Woke up at 12 a.m. The next morning I asked my friend if he heard or did anything. He just told me that he heard a loud mumbling from the room I was sleeping in. Didn't think anything else of it. I just hope you guys have anything for me, since I'm sick of this shit. I used to be a skeptic, but now I'm not so sure. There have been a few strange happenings in my life in the last 24 hours, and I feel like there's a lot of background information needed for it to make sense. To begin, both of my parents are dead. I'm a 24-year-old female now, but my mom passed when I was 15. My dad just 9 months later when I was 16. I'm sorry. Mom passed in a car accident, and Dad committed suicide. My dad was a firefighter for most of his life, and both parents struggled with addiction. I'm not sure how relevant that is, but just so you have all the information. So here's where it really starts. I was standing in the corner of my kitchen this morning. Huge open floor plan, so my back was to the rest of the apartment. I was making myself some breakfast when I hear what is distinctly a man. He took in a deep breath and then sighed. It sounded like it was right behind me. I spun around. Obviously nothing's there. It's just early morning. My cats were sleeping upstairs and I wouldn't be able to make that noise regardless. No electronics were on at all because my roommate and I unplugged them last night due to a lot of thunderstorms in our city. My roommate was asleep. He sleeps with tape over his mouth. Don't ask, he's a mouth breather. This way he couldn't have made that noise, not to mention that his room is on the other side of the kitchen, not behind me. I genuinely have no idea what could have made that noise other than some kind of entity. Or the tape came off. After that, I finished getting ready to go to work. I tell my coworkers what happened, and I started to kind of piece together some other things that have been going on lately, and I connected them. For example, last night at work, I got 2 phone calls within 5 minutes of each other, and both of them just said goodbye in a man's voice and then hung up. My roommate also left a candle burning in our shared bathroom overnight. My dad, the firefighter, spent the whole life just drilling fire safety into my head. So yesterday, I was going through a bunch of my things and spring cleaning essentially. I ended up finding a few of my dad's things that I've never seen before, even though I've, gone through his things dozens of times in almost 8 years that he's been gone. I found a very cryptic note with things written on it like despair, pain, loneliness, and darkness. This was at the bottom. My name was written and circled. I also found a cassette recorder with my dad's voice on it. I've been getting splitting headaches for the last 2 days, and I normally don't get them at all. The noise itself sounded like it came from the corner directly behind me, but the only things there are like a wax warmer and one of my dad's old bottles from his house, which has its own very creepy backstory. And lastly, to get to my apartment, you have to walk up to a stairwell that has motion sensor lights. For the past couple of days, the lights have been flickering non-stop. So all of that by itself, while still very alarming, could be kind of ignored. But then I get home from work today, open the door to the stairwell, the light's still flickering, until I'm standing directly below it. As soon as I get underneath it, it stops flickering and it's working normally. I stood there for almost a full minute, took a video of it to show my roommate, and the second I turned around to keep going up the stairs, it started to flicker again. What is following me? My first weird encounter happened when I was in elementary school. I can't remember what grade specifically, but I was definitely young. My older brother, we'll call him Jay, and I invited our neighbors Mike and Pay over for a Friday sleepover. My parents ended up hitting the hay earlier, around 9 p.m., so the four of us decided to take advantage of the mainly unoccupied house and play a good old game of hide-and-seek in the dark. For a reference, I used to live in a one-story house that was built in the 70s, so the windows were really low and easy to look through if you tried to. My window in my bedroom was positioned on the side of the house, diagonally from a pesky street light that always seemed to perfectly shine into my window every single night. I didn't own curtains, but I did have blinds on my window. I'd always keep them shut to try to help block out some of the light. Anyway, it was Mike's turn to count. My brother Jay, Pay, and we all decided to hide. I ended up shoving myself into a crowded and messy closet, which had one of those big folding doors. Because of the fact that my closet had 1,000,001 things in it, I didn't fit very well. The door wasn't able to really fully shut, and at the time I really didn't mind though. It gave me a little slit between the door that I could peek through. 1 minute turned into 5 when everybody eventually got found, aside from me. Mike was starting to grow impatient, so he asked Jay and Pay to help find me. That's when Pay, like the genius she is, ended up flinging my closet door open with an accomplished grin on her face. I don't remember much other than me complaining that she was cheating before my eyes drifted past her head and toward my bedroom window behind her. I remember my blood ran cold. The silhouette of a man with a hand literally cupped to the window, as if he was trying to peek in. It was enough to scare the ever-loving shit out of me. I screamed a blood-curdling scream which only caused Pay to turn on her heels and try to see what had me so frightened. It took all but 3 mere seconds before her screams joined mine and we both gripped onto each other and full-on sprinted into the living room. I nearly stumbled into my older brother's hands while my parents raced out of the bedroom. I ended up explaining to them through choked tears that there was a man outside my window. My older brother and stepdad grabbed a flashlight and a knife, checked every perimeter outside. I think there's only one perimeter. They even went as far as checking our surrounding neighbor's backyard and down the street. There was nothing, nobody, literally dead quiet. And just to add as a side note, I remember very clearly that it was downpouring rain that night, so it would be incredibly hard for anybody to escape quickly without leaving sunken footsteps in the mud and without the heavy sound of shoes slapping against wet earth. Fast forward many, many years. At this point, I'm 19 years old and end up moving in with my girlfriend and her family. And just to add in, I know it doesn't typically mean much, but the feeling of being watched and always having unknown company hovering behind me has been a feeling that I've felt for basically over a decade now. Sometimes I feel like it's just all in my head, and I'm sort of just psyching myself out, but other times the feeling just feels so damn real. It's like I can't shake it, like my body's trying to alert me and I'm not alone. The more I ignore my body and its warnings, the louder it screams. Anyway, I'm 19 now, living with my girlfriend and her family. One night I decided that I absolutely needed a midnight snack. My girlfriend had already been knocked out of sleep along with her younger brother and her parents. I went downstairs clutching onto the collar of her American bulldog because, like so many times before, I felt the unease of not being alone. For reference, to get to the kitchen, you have to come eye to eye with their sliding glass door that leads to their backyard, and I'm 100% certain that that night the door was shut and locked. 10,000% certain of it. I ended up making myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then I just sort of, like a shiver, it literally racks through me. I ignored, of course, and finished making my sandwich, clean up the mess I made before turning around and heading back upstairs. I end up turning just to stare at a half-open sliding glass door. I obviously immediately jumped into, oh my god, there's a human in the house right now. So I ran over to the door and shut it and locked it before checking out the entire downstairs. There wasn't a single soul other than me and the dog. Can't really explain how that happened. Even to this day, it fills me with a sense of unease. And when I woke up the next morning, I asked my girlfriend's parents if they could have forgotten to lock the door. They stared at me with confused looks before reassuring me that they always double-check that all the doors are locked each night. This next situation happened a few months later. My girlfriend and I decided to take a weekend trip back down to my hometown, to visit some friends and family. Basically, we joined my one friend at a bonfire that was being hosted at her grandmother's house. To quickly explain it, her grandmother lived on a pretty big plot of land in the middle of nowhere, where the only things surrounding her are back roads, a cornfield, and a thick bundle of trees lining her backyard. My girlfriend wanted to be silly and decided to leave the bonfire and sprint a little over 150 feet to lay on her back a few feet from the lining of the trees. My friend and I ended up just staring at her, waiting for her to pull one of her stupid jokes when a blood-curdling and utterly bone-chilling scream erupted from the forest. I've never seen my girlfriend get up and run towards us so fast a day in my life. She got back to us, she was shaking like a leaf with eyes wider than the moon itself. I've been with my girlfriend for 4 years, and I've, never known her to be a liar. And she swore on specific things that she loved, that there was something that screamed at me just a few feet away in the trees. She said she didn't see anyone or hear anything. It was dead silent when all of a sudden the scream ripped through the air. It sounded so terrifying that it even unnerved my friend's parents and grandma. This third situation happened not too long ago. My girlfriend ended up having to work the 24-hour at the fire station, so it's just me, the little brother, and the parents at home. Just like last time, my grumbling stomach kept me from being able to fall asleep. So with a sigh of defeat, I got up, went downstairs to grab food. When I came back up, I was fiddling with the lock, trying to keep the puppy gate at the top of the stairs, when I heard in a deep, gravelly whisper, someone whispering my name all drawn out. I jumped out of my skin and quickly set my plate on the food on the ground, and that way I could pull my phone's flashlight up and shine it toward the other end of the hallway. Again, surprise, surprise, there was nobody. I was completely alone in a dead silent hallway. So there was zero chance of me mistaking the noise to be a TV or something, as there was no TVs and no noise whatsoever. I ended up peeking my head into her parents' room and her little brother's room, and they were all sound asleep, drool and all. I ended up texting my girlfriend about it that night because I was completely just freaked out. When I woke up the next morning, I read that she texted me freaking out at 6 a.m. because she was changing in the girls' bathroom at the fire station when she heard a whisper. She explained it to sound exactly how mine did. It said hi, all drawn out like. I can't explain what that even means or what it could be, but it's safe to say that I'm never going to get midnight snacks alone again. This final thing happened just a week ago. I didn't experience it myself, but my girlfriend did. We were downstairs in the middle of the day talking to her mom. The hallway that has the bathroom and the front door is connected to the kitchen. So if you stand in the middle of the kitchen, you can see perfectly down in. My girlfriend randomly lurched forward into the hallway and smacked the wall right next to the bathroom door. I turned around, gave her a confused look because there was nobody there. I watched as she peeked her head into the bathroom, looking like she's expecting somebody to be there. That's when she quickly ducks back out and hurried back toward me. She explained that she turned around and saw the quick motion of a white sleeve or an arm moving into the bathroom, as if her little brother quickly ducked into the bathroom to try and hide and scare her. Well, she ended up catching his sleeve in the action, yet her little brother was at school and her father was in the living room with us. There was absolutely no one else in the house other than us four. Boy, question mark. Years ago when I was a kid, I was alone in the house, and I was being weird. I'd randomly decided to record myself on my boombox doing different cartoon voices, playing them back, Yogi Bear, Dexter, South Park, etc., to hear how close I'd gotten to the original. Had just recorded myself imitating the Beavis and Butthead laugh and was playing it back. That's when I heard an older, deeper, questioning voice from the stereo say, "Boy," kind of in that tone that older men get when they're questioning your sanity. It was as clear as he'd been in the room with me. No clue who said it, and like I said, I was home alone and thought I was safe in my strangeness. I actually kept that tape for years and would let friends listen to it, even though we'd always crack up at the tone, "Boy." It always gave me chills every time hearing it. They made fun of me for having even ghosts think I was weird. The way it was said kind of made me think of Hank Hill or Foghorn Leghorn letting loose with, "That boy ain't right." And the thing is that always spooked me the most was how it seemed to be in a direct response to my own shenanigans. Usually when it comes to things like this, I tend to try and look for a logical explanation as to what happened. If the voice had only been the one time, well, had never been heard again, I'd have just thought I must have been hearing things. I wouldn't have mentioned it to anyone, but it was there in the same place every time I played that cassette. Yeah, I got nothing on this one. Just thought it could make an amusing anecdote for the sub. Only one of the maybe handful of times I wasn't able to Scooby-Doo my way into an acceptable explanation. Is it on the tape? Question mark. Scary experience. This must have been when I was still in the 7th grade. I was going through a bad stage of my life, extremely depressed and suffering from unmanaged chronic pain. And all I would do all day is sleep while listening to music. So I was in bed trying to sleep while listening to music. I started to feel uneasy, like I was being watched, but I was so tired I didn't really care at first. I kept feeling someone's weight sitting on the side of the bed. Kept thinking it was my sister, but when I'd look there'd be no one but an imprint on the bed. I shrugged it off and laid my head back down. Then I heard and felt a whisper, like I felt air blow on my ear and I heard a whisper, even with my headphones on. That made me jump a little and I didn't care, so once again I laid my head back down. But before lying my head down, I noticed my room had like a weird mist. Like it was almost smoky, but it didn't smell anything. Once I closed my eyes, the end of my bed got picked up and dropped. That scared the shit out of me, so I finally got up, asked my sister if she heard a big bang to make sure I wasn't crazy, and she answered, "Yeah, what was that?" I told her and she immediately freaked out. She dabbles in witchcraft at the time, and she had a coven. They all tried to figure out what was attached to me and said it was a bad spirit. They said since I was having a bad time with chronic pain, that it was feeding off of my negative emotions. My sister blessed the 4 corners of my house, and nothing crazy like that's happened in a while. Good on her. Haunted hotel. So for a little vacation, me and my immediate family went to an alleged haunted hotel. We thought it'd be fun. It may be being haunted and being a really extravagant hotel sounded nice, too. The hotel is extremely old, like 1930s old. I can't remember why it's called or what it's called, but it's somewhere in Georgia. They have a hallway with pictures and items from the 30s of the hotel, and it's really neat. We lug all of our shit up to the hotel room, and immediately me and my siblings felt a weird energy. Nothing scary, just weird. Our room was giant and had a semi-decent view. Me and my siblings got our phones out to record and go ghost hunting. The hunting being just walking around. My sister brought her tarot cards. We stopped in a little corner of the hallway to do some readings. We maybe got into contact with some woman from the 30s who said she died in the hotel. A card was thrown out of the deck. It showed us the card with the woman lying dramatically on a bed with a male demon or an angel hovering over her. Nothing too crazy, especially since we couldn't confirm it was true or not. So we headed back to the hotel room. We're chilling on the bed watching TV, eating dinner. And all night, the light switches were flicking on and off. And at first it was scary, but it just got annoying. Then the toilet flusher kept flushing by itself, and the noise started to drive us insane. And then the craziest, not so craziest thing happened. An ice cube was picked up and thrown across the room. Well, my extremely skeptic mother was so flabbergasted because it was thrown toward her. She never believed in ghost stuff when we tell her, but it's always funny when supernatural stuff happens to her. It's nothing too crazy, but I thought I'd share anyways. Also, of course, the bathroom stuff could have just been technical issues, but it was just bizarre. The toilet flushing is a theme these last few days. How dare they waste water? Or, should I say, run up the electric bill, water bill. Incarcerated. I'm gonna keep it to the point here. I've seen ghosts all my life. I'm 30 now, and my pets, well, the dogs anyways, have also seen them. So I was locked up on some gun charges, blah blah blah. Whole time I was locked up, I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and always see a silhouette outside my cell after the CO did his round and went to sleep. She'd be there same as when I was a kid. I'd always see a woman, never her face. And fast forward, I copped out, did my time, went downstairs to the Supermax. I was in Max for 2 months, in a room all day that we could only shower 2 times a week. It sucked, but while I was there, my room was never ransacked by mice. They'd stay away from my cell. No roaches or bugs. Everyone on my gallery would say I'd be talking around 3 a.m. Even though I was in Max, I felt the most comfortable and I was able to sleep like regular. This way I wouldn't be up at those times. After I got sent more downstate to be a slave for the state, they'd regularly be crows watching me from the fence when I was in the yard. Whether I'd be walking or working out, they'd just watch. No caws or flying down. Then the owls started appearing by my window at night. I was in a dorm and my bed was by the window. I'd know it was there every time I felt a presence. And just before I got released, I had a dream the crows were in my dorm, and as I followed them out my room at the end, there was a woman in all black, long hair, just standing there. I took a step toward her because I wanted to finally see her. She went through the wall to the center of the building where the officers would watch both sides of the dorms, and all she said was, "Run!" And the doors that led me out to freedom all opened. I woke up, and since then, I still see her. But now I hear whispers every now and then. More since after the eclipse. I don't know if my aunt who passed away before I was born or someone else. Or something else. A fellow I was locked up with told me that I walked into the pod that he knew something was following me. It's because he's a spirit guide or a reader or some shit. But to be honest, I ignored him a lot until he told me my aunt's name. He told me that's the name that's, well, that the spirit that followed me is taking care of me, but also lets bad things happen to me, but not to sever. I don't know what to think. I can explain a lot more than I just had to get this off my chest, though. I tell people and they laugh it off or tell me I'm crazy, and the only person who knows I'm telling the truth is my daughter. She's also seen ghost spirits whenever she was under a year old, and she's about to be 7. And same, she says she sees a woman, but she can't make out any features. I've almost died a handful of times, but somehow death is missed, and she's saving me for something big, or I'm just tripping. My path of seeing. I come from a very rural part of the west coast of Ireland. The little country cottage I was raised in has been in our family for 12 generations. As a young man, I was very used to catching things out of the corner of my eye only to look over and nothing being there. I assumed this stuff happened to everybody and never really questioned it or looked into it too deeply. I would just repeat what people used to tell me. It's just my mind playing tricks on me. Apart from a couple of profound experiences I had that I really couldn't write off, I chose mainly to deny that it was real. That was until I had an undeniable sighting in Sydney, Australia. That's where I had someone beside me, a woman who was most definitely tapped into seeing spirits. We'd been chatting about how I think I have seen stuff, but I really wasn't sure. Later that evening, we were both standing out the back having a cigarette. We were in this lodge in North Sydney. It was clearly a very old building. That's when something caught my eye. I looked over at the bathroom and in the doorway. That's when she said, "There's no one there." I had clearly seen it, and now I was looking at it and I wasn't so sure. To explain the scene, it was a doorway with a well-lit toilet on the other side of the doorway. The walls were all white tile. What I could see was a change in contrast. It was as if there was a light shadow on the wall on the other side of the bathroom until it moved. When it moved, I realized it wasn't on the wall at all. It was just in front of the doorway, only 2 meters in front of me. I probably, with my rational brain, could have written it off, but just as it moved, she said, "Oh, there it goes." Well, she said it so nonchalantly. I, of course, freaked. I was like, "I just saw that." She was like, "Yep." And then immediately said, "I've always been seeing these," she said. Yep. Seems that all I needed was somebody to verify what I was seeing for me to believe it. I looked straight at her with shock. "So all of those times I woke up at night and I saw..." She looked at me smiling and said, "Yep." Well, I continued on with my life. I continued traveling, and since then I've seen a lot more. I don't speak about it to those who don't want to know, but they're everywhere. Except for a couple of experiences where a very clear, darker energy has wanted to mess with me. They mostly have stayed away from me, just seeing them from a distance. Just like another ship in the night, much like myself. Until recently. I moved into a new house for a few months back. That's when I would lay in bed at night and I'd have to close the door. I could feel something standing out in the hallway just peeking in at me. It felt innocent, but it would make me uncomfortable to sleep, but I hadn't seen anything. One night I walked out into the kitchen to get some water. All the lights in the house were off except for a little fairy light that was wrapped around my headboard. It gently glowed out into the kitchen. In my sleepy state, I made my way back to the room. I noticed that there was an obstacle in front of me. I could just see it in the glow of the fairy lights. I gave it a wide berth as to not stub my toe, and it wasn't until I got around it and I think, "Hold up, I didn't leave anything there." I spun around and there was nothing there, but I can't explain it. I've been given an understanding. I just know it was a little girl. Pictured it in my head between the age of 7 and 9, but I fell back into an old pattern and just passed it off, and it was just a one-off. I mentioned it to a friend a few days later after in passing. She had all but forgotten about it. A few months later, this friend moved in with me, and when I was at work, my mother, who's a psychic, had come over to our house. My friend swears she's never said anything to her mother about what I had experienced. Her mother sure meets and talks to this little girl. She tells her that she's 7, and her name is Sarah, and she has been hit by a car out on the road in the 70s. It was said that she is she's been very scared and alone for a long time. And she was told that I'd seen her too. Said that she must feel safe around me to have shown herself to me. I had to sage the house the other day because something followed me back, but I was sure to make clear that Sarah was still welcome. Oh, and yes, we searched it up, and yes, we found a newspaper article about a young girl dying on the road from a hit and run in the 76. It's all very sad, but I'm kind of excited because it's incredibly vindicating with these sightings I've got verified by others and historical evidence. I've spoken to some people about what's necessary during moments like this. It can be helpful to offer them help with passing on if that's what they want. So I've studied up on that, and I will be ready to help if she comes in again. Lancaster, Pennsylvania, still bothers me. I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and this happened last year in the middle of the winter in January. There's a trail called Cheeky's Rock, which runs along the Susquehanna River right beside Route 30 bridge that crosses the river. Maybe that's pronounced Chickies. It was Sunday evening. It had to be about 4:30-ish because it wasn't dark, but it was starting to be. We were walking on the trail looking for a spot where we could smoke. My brother was taking a piss 2 feet off the trail, and I kept walking. And let me say that there was no one else on the trail at all, and no cars in the lot, just ours. I looked down the trail, and I'd say about 30 yards from us, and I saw what looked to be an animal that looked very odd. It looked like a mixture of a kangaroo, a greyhound dog, and a deer. It was grayish in color. It had to have really light fur. The way that it walked was strange. I still remember the hoppy steps it would take and looked like it would stand on its feet. I called out to my brother and he was able to catch a look of it. The strangest thing was that whatever this was coming our way, and once we looked at it, it darted off the trail into the woods. Mind you, it was winter. No leaves or bushes were present. You couldn't see it anymore, and it was unexplainable how it vanished just like that. It wasn't heavily wooded, so we were able to clearly see between trees. We tried to justify it, and we never talk about it anymore, really. But I know he and I both know that that was not a dog, a deer, or a kangaroo in central Pennsylvania. My only real paranormal experiences. My dad died of cancer in 2020. And the night that he died, I wasn't there with the rest of the family when he passed, unfortunately. But I was meant to go that weekend to see him one last time. He came to me in a dream. I was at the hospice center and he was laying in bed telling me he was fine, everything was okay and stuff. It was very reassuring, and it was 100% him, I believe. I also sometimes have dreams where he's there. We'll be talking, and at some point I'm aware that it's not right, if you will. I'll ask him if he's dead. Because it'll be my normal life, almost like deja vu sort of a feeling, but Dad's there. The only scary one was when it was him and I talking to him in our house, and my grandma and my aunt who all passed. And I don't know how we got on the conversation, but he said, "You can stay if you want, but it's not your time. You've got time left." I woke up so abruptly. I'm pretty convinced I almost died that night, but my soul decided it wasn't time. I don't know, nothing explains that. I wasn't actually scared, FYI. Maybe discomforted. Are we being irrational? To start this off, I lived in southern Minnesota, in basically the middle of nowhere, and for privacy purposes, I will be using fake names. It was around 9 p.m. when this took place, quite literally today. So I was with my friends Allie and Ella. They were driving around in my golf cart. Went to a spot where I would normally hike. It was sort of a large valley, not really sure how else to describe it, but it was an abandoned construction zone that was never finished. We were exploring in the open, just looking for cool rocks to take home. Yeah. There was some sort of bird that kept following us. Every time we would approach it, then it would fly away, but the second we kept, it just kept appearing again. It wouldn't leave us. but we thought nothing of it, and it sounded almost like it was making warning calls. Ella thought she had heard a man's voice, but brushed it off. This is important. We decided to head to the other part of the valley, which was close to a nearby river. It was basically a clearing surrounded by trees with a big mound of dirt and rubble in the middle. We stopped because I had said that there's always some cool stuff to find there. So I parked the golf cart, and right as we're about to get off, I get this overwhelming feeling of danger and feeling of doom. Felt like my stomach had dropped to the floor. Then Ella points to the top of the mound. On the top was standing some sort of creature. It was tall and skinny, short hair, coyote-like ears, a short neck, and a normally long body. It was too small to be a deer, but too big to be a coyote. Stood there just staring. It wouldn't move. I froze, completely unaware of my friend screaming at me to drive away. We had a very strong feeling of danger and fear. We had instant bad feelings. When we were driving away, it stood there, slowly turning its neck as we drove past. This was not a deer. Got a good look at it, and it was not anything I've seen before. We were speculating that the bird was a warning sign, and we saw something that we weren't supposed to see. We are in utter shock and have no idea what to do. Please help, I'm losing my mind over this. Shadow Nun of Zemun Hospital. I live in Serbia, Europe. In 2016, I was stuck for 2 days in the children's cardiology ward in Zemun Hospital for 24 hours ECG. Usually they do these at home, but children aren't trusted that they'd keep it on correctly. The ward is in a separate building from the communist-era built annex, and it's a really old and small 2-story building from the 1800s. I was alone in a huge room with beds. I was alone because for some strange reason I was one of the 3 kids on the floor, excluding the babies' mothers, which had separate room. I didn't see much of the other 2. One was a girl with measles and the other was a boy in the room. So I got the big room for myself, apparently. The room was rectangular shaped with beds lined up against each wall. I took the upper left corner bed and wheeled the TV card right in front because nobody was going to watch it anyways except me. As night fell, I stayed up past midnight. A nurse came in, turned off the lights, and told me to sleep after a while. And I turned the TV off, laid on my side. There was moonlight outside that lightened the room up still. Closed my eyes and waited to sleep and waited for it to take over me, and well, it didn't. I felt a sudden urge to open my eyes. What I saw was a really tall nun-like figure, which is weird because Serbia is an Orthodox country and has no classic Catholic nuns. We do, however, have some minority Catholics. She stood in the center of the room. It wasn't sleep paralysis, I could move, but I just laid low. She walked or floated, her garments hit her legs to each bed. She stood by each bed for a few moments and then headed to the next one. She did this for each bed in the room, skipping mine. After that, she walked to the door, came back, then disappeared in the center. A year after, I Googled some history, and it turns out the building was a frontline hospital for the Austro-Hungarian soldiers in World War I, as Zemun was a border town between AH and Serbia. The hospital was ran by the local nuns of the Franciscan monastery in Zemun, which exists to this day. I think my dog visited me 3 times after he passed away 3 years ago. Is this the right subreddit for this post to be here? I posted it before, but I keep deleting it because I wasn't sure if it was the right one. But here it goes. This is what I'm about to tell, and this time it'll stay up for good. I once had a dog who had black and brown fur and was a mixed breed. A Chihuahua Beagle mix, according to the veterinary papers about him. And he would have annual checkups. I still remember the day he passed away from health problems. It was on November Friday morning, and everyone in my household mourned for him, of course, including me. The first time I've seen him was in my dream. In it, he was young and lively. And when I mean young, I mean that he was in his prime, prior to his health problems. He wasn't a puppy nor an old dog. He was maybe around 10 years old if I remember correctly. The dream itself is a different story. Stuff happened in it which I will tell another time. The second time was when I was eating some leftover food in the dining area in the afternoon. My peripheral vision, I saw him sitting in the living room facing towards me as a black silhouette. He was just sitting there looking at me from a good distance away, like 8 feet away. I wasn't spooked by that, honestly, but I did look in that general direction. The third time and final time is when I was still up late at night, like 1 a.m. watching YouTube videos. Hopefully not this. Scratch that, hopefully. I saw him walk out of the room. It headed toward my elder sister's room and then out of sight. He appeared as a black silhouette yet again, and after that I never saw him again, not even to this very day. All 3 sightings happened on separate times, not 3 times in a row or in a single day. It was sometime after he passed away and like weeks later. Does this mean anything, or am I seeing things due that I still miss him and my brain created a figment of my imagination to comfort me? I've already moved on, but I still miss him a lot. I would cry every time I type about him, and it still hurts no matter how much time passes. I'm sorry. Random thought come true. I'm not sure if I'm in the right subreddit for this, but I wanted to share a weird thing that happened to me about 2 months ago, I would say. I live in a college town on a busy street close to downtown, and the blind spots are awful everywhere. We have intersections that have you stop between lanes to ensure safe crossing, and alongside this, most of the city streets is parking. So anyways, one day I had this random thought where I was like, you know, for this street to be as busy as it is, and for so difficult for tourists to understand, I wonder how I've never heard somebody get into an accident. I think I maybe thought about it again before I went to sleep, but then I woke up in the middle of the night. Can't really remember what time, maybe 2 or 4 a.m. I had the thought as soon as I woke up, and I remember feeling kind of anxious. Literally seconds later, I heard someone crash on the street right across from where my room is. I was literally stiff. I was so anxious. Like, did I just subconsciously cause that to happen? Still gives me the creeps today, as it was so timed and specific. Like, of all the nights and of all the times I could have woke up, it's kind of crazy to me. Right before he died. When I was in high school, I talked to this guy for a little while. Just didn't work out, typical high school stuff. Decided to date somebody over him. We kind of fell off and didn't talk much after that, as you'd assume. He was 2 years older than me. Shortly after he graduated, almost 2 years later, he ended up passing in a car accident. He was the only one of the 2 others in the car to pass. The night before I found out, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and standing in the corner of my room as a teenage boy bloodied. I didn't really think much of it because weird stuff happened to me often at that time. Is it possible it was him? Was it just intuition of knowing something bad happened? Has anyone else ever experienced this? I've never had this happen again, and the only other time similar stuff's happened is in recent years. It was right after my grandfather passed that I had a dream. Me realizing in my dream it wasn't possible that he's there because he's dead, and he acknowledging that and said it's okay. Then again, in passing conversation the day of, I mentioned to somebody on the off chance, yeah, his goat is probably going to pass soon. Then got a text that day the goat passed earlier that morning. No, the goat wasn't actively sick either. My parents' house is haunted. My parents' house is haunted, and it permanently damaged me. It's also affecting other inhabitants of the house. So some data on the house. It was built by a rich noble family in 1674 in a little village in northern Germany as part of a bigger estate. It was supposed to house the servants, workers, and gardeners. Sadly, the construction of the main building was never started in the first place as money ran out. So after a few years, well, what has been built was sold to another family, and another one, so on and so forth. The last family that owned it, the family father was very rich, had a lot of money in America. 1928 happened, and, well, he shot himself in the head in order to not dishonor his family. The house was never the same after that. After World War II, the house was taken over by the GDR and repurposed. It housed a kindergarten, a shop, and a communal government. After Germany's reunification, it was left empty, until 2000 or 2001, where my parents bought it for very cheap, because, well, it was in shambles. It needed a lot of work done, but my parents took the challenge and made this house a home. I've had a great childhood there, most of the time at least, and, well, my sister moved back in with my parents, and there was just so much room. She's going to inherit it someday, so it'll stay in the family. It all sounds like a happy after story, but not all people under that roof are alive. It started when I was 5 or 6. I was sleeping alone in my parents' bed when suddenly it started shaking. I thought that this wasn't real and the earth must be shaking itself. Well, imagine my surprise when I looked around the room and down the bed and I saw it floating around 3 or 4 centimeters off the ground. Jumped off of it and ran to my parents. But as you can imagine, the bed was back to normal when I showed them. Another day I was going to a room where a big goat head hangs on one of the walls. Again with the goats. It's made out of clay, and it always kind of creeped me out because it follows you with its eyes. But this day, I'll never forget. It was pretty much broad daylight, and it spoke to me, called out to me and said, in German of course, "Hallo, hallo, come here," in German, so what is that in German? Well, hello is hallo. I used to know German. Oh well. Anyway, that scared the shit out of me and I ran away. The head's still hanging there and I've had multiple encounters with it. Sometimes its eyes look somewhere else and then move to look at you. Never spoke again, though. When I was around 10, a buddy and I took pictures for fun with an old camera. Sadly, this camera does not exist anymore. We captured white smoke coming out of the chimneys even though none of the ovens were lit. This was in high summer. I've heard voices multiple times in certain rooms of the house between these major events. Every time I walked in the house at night, it felt like somebody was following me. Sometimes something crept up to me and I had to run away. It wasn't pleasant, and of course, all different kinds of sounds, steps, doors slamming, drawers opening, the whole shebang. I was 12 when I first saw him. I didn't sleep very well that night. I stood up from my bed and wanted to go to my parents. Already when I took my first step, I felt so cold and the room was darker than ever before. I went to my drawer, turned on the light. It worked, but it didn't flood the room as usual. Walked to the door that led to my parents' room, opened it, and decided to have a last look back. Wish I didn't. I saw him coming out of the wall, a dark figure. It looked like a Dementor from Harry Potter. I didn't know anything about Harry Potter at that time. Had like long tree-like figures. It reached after me and opened its mouth. I ran for my life and slept with my parents. I looked up photos of the man who killed himself in the house, and it had to be him. At 16 years old, I was talking to an ex on the phone. Told her the story and about the man. Suddenly the room filled with a heavy breathing, and my phone started to stutter. It seemed like he didn't like what I said. We moved into another part of the house years later and I got a new room. My parents' room wasn't renovated at the time, so I got to move in before them. At night, I woke up from a good sleep, sat up, looked at my door. My door had 2 blurred windows installed at the top. I saw multiple pairs of eyes staring me down. Then it began. Something was shaking the door and hammering like crazy. At this time, I'd become a Norse pagan. I'd prepped the door with the runes and prayed to the gods. I stood up and shouted at the door, "Go away, it's just me, you idiot." It stopped. It felt like the ghost took me for an intruder but realized that he was mistaken. My sister's boyfriend has also seen a dark figure in the barn and another figure walking past windows and doors, even in daylight. He moved in later than, well, all of us, of course. He wasn't used to it. We've all seen it. It's part of the house. We all know he's there, and no one doubts it. Now, how has this damaged me? For as long as I can remember, I saw eyes everywhere in the house. They were looking at me or each other. When there were many eyes, the energy was very bad and something was about to happen. I've moved out about 1.5 years ago. My life's never been better. I don't see any weird stuff anymore anywhere. The building I live in now is clean and I've smoked out my flat. Of course, this could be all in my head. Yeah, maybe I'm mentally ill. I don't know. It's not affecting me negatively right now. I've lived part at home, part in boarding school for 5 years until I graduated school. When I was in boarding school, I've never seen anything. Only when I was in the house or cemeteries. A few experiences from a few years ago that I believe may be related. Thoughts. I'd say it was about 3-ish years ago, give or take, when these things happened. The first one I really noticed was when my dad and I were watching a movie together. Randomly in the middle of it, it felt like somebody was tightly holding my hand, sort of propped on the armrest of the couch. I looked at my hand and obviously nobody was holding it. I even moved my hand a bit, but I still had that feeling that someone was holding it. The feeling stayed there for a couple of minutes before going away. Around the same time, there was one night where I'd just gotten in bed and turned off the lamp. Right after I lied down, I felt like someone sat on top of the covers in the edge of the bed next to my legs. I had just gotten in bed only a few seconds prior, so I know it wasn't a dream. I got a sinking feeling in my stomach where I just couldn't move for a second. But that was probably just nerves. I said, "Hello?" Got no response. When I opened my eyes, there was no one there. With the way I was lying on my side, I was facing the windows. Though the blinds were shut, I could still see some light through them. Had someone been sitting there, I would have seen their silhouette. And again, after a few minutes, the physical feeling of somebody sitting there went away. I don't have any history of sleep paralysis or lucid dreams. And aside from the original shock of nerves from the occurrence in my bedroom, neither experience felt particularly malicious. They actually felt kind of comforting in a way. There have also been times when someone else is in the house and they'd hear me talking or vice versa. For example, I was asked who I was talking to loudly on the phone when, well, I'd been silently playing video games alone for a few hours prior. Other times I'd hear someone else in the house distinctly calling my name, but when asked, they would deny ever having called me. One of my grandparents, maybe two, I don't remember these experiences, happened between their deaths or right after, both since they died very close to each other time-wise, died very soon before these occurrences. So I'm not sure if maybe that's something to do with it. I know for a fact that nobody's ever died in this house. Toddler seeing my dead mom. My toddler sleeps in my room at night. About 2 weeks ago, after getting ready for bed, we laid down to read her book. She starts pointing to a corner of the room asking, "What's that?" repeatedly. Thought nothing of it at the time, so I deflected by saying, "It's a wall." Shifted her focus to reading her bedtime book before we tucked her in for the night. While we were reading, though, she kept looking up to the same spot in the room, and then eventually her focus moved over to the door or hallway. I stopped reading to look at her, and I see what she's pointing at. She says, "What doing? What you doing?" Talking to something when there's nothing there. I asked her, "What is it?" She says, "Hey, Grandma. Hi, Grandma." At this point, I'm shitting myself because I don't know what to think. I ended up leaving it at that and just put her to sleep. My ex and I co-parent, and his mom doesn't want to be called Grandma, so they have another nickname for her. I asked him the next day if there was any chance I'd ever get, if there's any chance it ever gets said at his place, and he said no. So I spent the next few days racking my brain trying to figure out why she would be saying it. Cartoons or something, maybe. Yeah. That weekend I decided to pull out some old family photos. And upon recommendation from a friend after hearing the story, and sure as shit she pointed directly to my mom. She points to my mom and says, "It's Grandma," with no prompting. My mom's been dead since 2020. My toddler's never seen a photo of her, yet she pointed directly to her out of all the other photos of women in her family, young and old. A whole family disappeared. I'd like to share my childhood experience. In my town, from age of 7 to 12, I had a best friend named Aaron. He was playful, always cheerful and witty and intelligent. His family rented a place from a relative of my brother-in-law. His family consisted of his parents, his sister, and him. We always hung out in the afternoons and on weekends. My cousin Aaron and I would get together, and it's worth noting that neither he nor his sister attended school. We were like the Three Musketeers. Although Aaron was much more mature than us, not in a bad way, but because he was very intelligent, knew about everything, had answers for everything. Everything was normal, and I have the best memories of our mischief and games. I remember he taught me songs and words in a language I don't know. He also drew strange pictures, and at his house there were figures and something like an altar with similar drawings. Here comes the strange part. In the 7 years that we knew each other, neither he nor his sister nor his parents aged a single day. They remained unchanged. I also remember that once they invited me to dinner, and when he started talking about the moon and its power, his mother and father looked at him with a face as if telling him to be quiet and change the subject. His house was surrounded by a yard and had 2 entrances, the main one and the one from the patio leading to the kitchen. At the age of 13, one afternoon we waited for him to go out and play, but he didn't show up, so we went to go look for him. My cousin and I went through the patio entrance and heard him telling his mom that he didn't want to leave. She said, "You know how it is, we could be discovered." They continued talking in a mix of his language and ours. At that point, my cousin whistled and he yelled, "I'm coming." He went to play ball, and I was left wondering what they had been talking about. I waited for the right moment to ask him, which was in the late afternoon after the game. He told my cousin and me something we'll never forget because his voice changed and became serious. He told us his family came from a lineage that didn't age normally like us, that he wasn't really 13. They traveled everywhere. My cousin jokingly asked, "So how old are you, 80? And he replied, 64. I got goosebumps. From there, we each went home. The next day, his house was empty, and there was no trace of him or his family. We never saw him in the town again. They disappeared completely. The question of what really happened will always gnaw at me. We all remain with this doubt, and to this day everybody in the town remembers. I would like that story to be longer. If you're the person who wrote that story, reach out and give me more details. I like that one. See you next time.